Hey, look at that. A new camera angle-y thingy. Well, it's not a new camera angle. It is a new position, though. You can now see more of me and less of the ceiling. Boy heckin' howdy. Isn't that swell? So, I'm going to make this random extra intro brief. Yes, hi, hello. I am sure I'm going to be spending a lot more time staring above the camera this time because this is my first attempt at having a script, and unfortunately for me, I do not have the luxury of having a long enough camera cord that it can reach up to the top of the monitor, thus making my looking at things less obvious. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. I had to write a script for this one because otherwise I was going to completely and utterly not do things in a manner in which they are brief. This is still not going to be brief, by the way. I wrote a script hoping that it would help keep things brief, and the script is now 3 pages long, and I was just like, oh boy. So, I am notably bad with scripts, but if I did not have a script, this would very quickly fly off the rails, and I have way too many feelings about this game for me to not have a script written down. So, we're going to see how this goes. This intro is already much longer than it was supposed to be. Whoops. Alrighty. I'm gonna just argue with this for a hot second. We're going to try to put the thing closer to the camera so that I need to not look all the way up here when I'm doing things, but you know, this is my life. So there have been dozens of videos on the subject of the ending of Ruin, and quite frankly, I am not qualified to give any more than my silly little opinion on this matter. No. I'm here to briefly go over the basics of what the Mimic is, what it does, what the hell the Mimic glitch is, and then I'm going to add my own little bit of fuel to the Monty is Innocent fire, because there's been some stuff that has not been mentioned regarding the fact that a lot of people are pointing towards the Mimic and forgetting a few things, which is fine, because this franchise is freaking gigantic, so that's to be expected. And this whole Monty is Innocent thing seems to be dividing the fan base in half. I'm going to go ahead and let Dawko, not real name, not at all, It's Fantasy, John from FNAF, Matt, Pat, and whoever else wants to throw their information into the rink explain this far better than I will ever be able to explain it, and they can go far deeper into every single annoying detail about them. That is not what this video is supposed to be for. Heckin' darn. They can go into every single random detail about this hecking endo made out of sewing machines and extra steel beams that just shoved itself into this series, and how it works, and why it technically makes sense, which I suppose is the best way to make sense. I'm not here to argue with that, and I'm not here to argue with the fact that it does make sense. I'm here to tell you how I would fix this all by doing basically nothing except making 2 very small swaps so that the people who are new to this franchise can still make sense of the ending without having to pick up a single one of those Goosebumps but Make It Freddy's, but only sometimes, books that also overcomplicate the lore consistently. A way to keep the story of the DLC exactly the same, with no major changes, except you would not need to have the Mimic. Because, well, guess what? This franchise already had one. So, It's incredibly important to note that since the release of the first trilogy of novels, and on through the literally dozens at this point books that have come out, there has always been a through line of the questionable canonicity between the books and the games. Scott himself said that they were canon, but in an alternate reality sort of way, and since then, they have been consistently referencing the books in the games and hints of things of shared and paralleled throughout the stories. That's just been always there since they started creating books. Yes, from my puppety favorite, my favorite puppety boy, suddenly having a gender change before being unceremoniously shoved into a big black bear by a cruel and supposedly well-meaning father, never to be seen again, all the way to sound illusion discs being all but confirmed to exist within the games. I'm sad to inform you that if you wanted any more than surface-level understanding of this series, you had better make your way to the local Scholastics book fair and clear an entire shelf off for your new book collection. Because, oh boy, is it going to expand. Not to mention that they also like to make sneaky little changes between the original story and the graphic novel redraws. So be prepared to read oh so many of the stories twice. Let's just hope they never decide to make sea bonnies an actual threat in the game. Because that, you know, I'm not gonna lie though, a FNAF-themed aquarium game is actually something my concerningly easily entertained brain would be thrilled with. If you're going to make the books canon, give me the giant robot shark. Please give me the giant robot shark. I'm all for giant robot sharks. Right. So the fact that this is the case makes it very hard for newer and more casual fans to just pick up the game. I imagine Security Breach was a lot of people's first game, since it was the first AAA title that wasn't limited to VR, and I'm sure that means all of those people that just wanted to play the game and not read several books in the meantime, are incredibly confused by the DLC. Because I know a lot of people who aren't even aware that there are in fact FNAF books that go along with the games. And the problem is that these people are going to be sadly mistaken if they think, well, I can just go back and play the old games, and that will explain what happened. Oh, the Mimic. Let's get started on that problem, shall we? To make this easy, we're going to take this in parts because the Mimic has two of them. And we're going to start with the one that we see in-game, the endoskeleton. This is the part where I'm going to probably rereading a lot more, so, you know, good, just a warning. Within the books, there are seemingly underlined thread of fathers buying or making things for their children only to get sick of those things and do their very best to destroy them. And this is no exception. To put it briefly, an overworked engineer doesn't have time for his child and decides to build him a friend. This friend is made of random extra things around the warehouse, as he presumably can't use the actual animatronic parts, and has a rather basic AI learning program installed. This robot is made to learn visually and take on the interest of his son, sort of like a shadow. Reminds me of a certain black and white and cone-nosed clown friend. Naturally, per the way these stories tend to go, the child dies and the father is left with his robot that mimics his child exactly. The father loses it, beats the robot until he assumes it can't do anything anymore, runs away. Obviously, the machine is not only very alive, but it now knows rage and violence. Cool. Did I mention that the father was building robots for Fazbear? Yeah, that's how they made this story connect to Fazbear. Yeah. I guess that's fair. Eventually, they go, hey, why don't we have those things we ordered? Why do we not have the things that we wanted from this guy yet? And they send a team off to look for the guy. Now, It's important to note that within the books, the Endo mimicked everything that it got from the child. And that included playing pretend and dressing up. So really, this team stood absolutely no chance. It lurked around in some costumes, ready to strike whoever shambled past. Somehow, someway, in the far future after that, this damn Endo ended up in the shipment with the Glamrock animatronics to the Pizzaplex. How? The whole basement area under the raceway we see was apparently supposed to be cleaned up and made into a museum, similar to all the cases in Rockstar Row. So apparently all of the stuff that is from the old pizzeria was supposed to end up in the basement. So they send the animatronics down there to help clean up the giant mess and prepare the place, and naturally the Mimic was one of them, seemingly rebooted at least enough that it's not a threat. Until one of the poor idiots decides that it would be a great idea to tamper with the Endo and set it about ripping the limbs off of the old rotting animatronics that were still left in the old pizzeria simulator place. And it does that very well, in fact, until it runs out of animatronics. I'll let you fill in the blank, but that's why the whole area was sealed off. Nothing was allowed in or out of that old pizzeria. There was another story that also showed that this Mimic thing could interfere with radio signals, and the issue is that there are still more Pizzaplex books to come out, and thus we may or may not find out more about this Mimic, especially given that the Mimic story seems to be taking the place of the old Stitch Wraith stories from the previous series, which means that it gets to be continued at the very end of every single one of the Pizzaplex books. But this is all of the information that we have on the endoskeleton part. What we know is that it's been programmed to watch and learn, so that they didn't have to worry about programming any individual show into the endoskeleton. It was also made so that it could be shoved into any show that it was required to, so that they didn't have to worry about creating new shells for it constantly. They could just put it into any suit that they needed it to be in, and it could perform the show of the character from that suit. Now, fortunately for us, part 2 about the Mimic glitch is incredibly short, which is great because I'm getting mildly annoyed by this. The Mimic isn't just an Endo, obviously. The Mimic is the programming inside of the Endo as well. The Mimic AI programming whatever thingy is essentially hooked into the entire Pizzaplex. It controls the games, it controls the stories that play out in the theater, it controls the animatronics. It's essentially the book's answer to Glitch Trap. But we have no confirmation that Glitch Trap is in-game lore an extension of the Mimic, and we have nothing stating in-game that the Mimic is an extension of Glitch Trap. So they seem to simply be parallels, at least for now. Oh boy. Now, here's where I insert a random part about Monty's innocence concerning the Bonnie incident, because there's a few things that people keep not adding into their things, so I'm going to. Now, I'm not going to go over all the points against Monty being the culprit. There are several videos that already go through that. There's a Tumblr post. I'm personally going to refer you to Ask Error 87, who does a lovely video about the entire thing, pointing out all of the reasons why Monty was probably innocent and why it was most likely the Mimic. I'm pretty sure she got all of that information from a Tumblr post, or you know, whatever. I'm pretty sure they got all that information from a Tumblr post. Monty was framed, and I can prove it, will be in the pinned comments below, as YouTube has deemed that I have not verified my account, even though I have, which is why I'm capable of uploading videos longer than 10 minutes long. And thus I cannot post links in the description. I apologize, but that do be how it do be, apparently. This is just a couple of points in the Mimic Actually Did It pile that I want to throw in. The Mimic Endo and the Mimic program are at least somewhat intrinsically connected to each other. That said, this explains why Bonnie just vanishes from Bonty Golf, but is found in Bonnie Bowl. If the Mimic program has control over the Pizzaplex, it could have turned all of the cameras away from itself or simply turned them off. If we want to play a third, slightly more problematic option, the books state that sound illusion discs can't be picked up on camera. It simply makes whatever it's attached to appear as blurry pixels. That can be blamed on a glitch. That means it could have gotten its hands on some of those from the old Pizzaplex. We have no idea how long Bonnie has been out of commission, but it would have had to have been somewhat recently, given that people at the time of the base game were still asking about him. You would think that would be points against this, but no, actually. Because what else started somewhat recently? Vanny and her lovely trips down to see the now questionably canon Peepaw Afton, and unintentionally releasing the Mimic into the Pizzaplex yet again. Until the presumably now canon ending, where we save Vanny and she and Greg lock it back up with their impeccable programming skills. Why could no one find Bonnie's body until Cassie showed up? Well, if the Mimic controls all of the AI world up until Greg and Vanny install the Mexis program, then that makes it very simple. It's because the Mimic essentially deleted that room from the maps to cover itself, removing it from being able to be found either in AI mode or on any other physical maps. It would have almost been like the sealed room that they found Springtrap in the first place. Alright, moving on. Now I'm going to assume that you all know how the Ruin DLC goes, because if not, how the hell did you get here? Random scrolling only takes you so far. You may be wondering now about those very simple fixes I mentioned earlier. How can I possibly keep the story of this game, or at least this DLC, essentially the same, without requiring any reading to understand it? So, here's what I think they should have done, so that you could find the entire story of the DLC within the previous parts of the franchise. We'll start with the first change that we would encounter, and quite frankly the smallest change, the Blob. Freddy Spaghetti. Oh, presumably Molten Freddy, now stripped of all of his personality and given nothing better to do than stand about and shuffle spookily. Charming. I stand firmly on the belief that this should have been Lefty, and not a blobby mess. The change to this would be simple. You simply remove the Funtime Freddy mask and you put on that of our lovely Black Bear. Yeah, remember that Black Bear I mentioned before? Now, Not Real Name did a full video on this mistake, and it kind of ties everything in really well with FNAF's whole constant "the puppet is in control" thing. So I'm not the only one who thinks this. Links to Not Real Name's video will also be in the description. But put basically, for purposes of this, all of the strings literally we're leaning towards Lefty being in the hole. There. And this entire event was entirely unsatisfying. Puppet references are throughout the whole place. Sorry, I completely lost my place there. It happens when you have mild dyslexia. You would think I would have figured this out and, like, made this easier for my brain to comprehend, but nope. We're just going to restart here. I'm going to try to keep this entire thing brief, and I'll link the specific video that I'm referencing in the comments. But basically, for the purposes of this, all of the strings were leading towards a wholly unsatisfying turn of events. Puppet references are throughout the whole place. Stripes throughout the wiring and the servers and arcades. The staff bots themselves and hidden plushies throughout the place. The simple act of replacing that useless Funtime Freddy mask with that of Lefty's suddenly gives all of that purpose, as well as giving the blob itself a reason to exist, outside of just being another obstacle that makes absolutely certain you bring Freddy with you into the ending. And besides, we can't have that hint sitting there for our biggest change. We already have the perfect character to be in the spot of the Mimic in the games. His name is Ennard. I know it's really hard to remember that he exists, with his very existence being cut horribly short by the existence of Molten Freddy. You could even technically get away with having Molten Freddy be the one there instead. You could have used that silly little burned up bear for an actual purpose, and still kept the story the same. You're already in the Pizza Sim location when you enter the basement. Ennard is just Molten Freddy with a different mask, and a presumably slightly more tame personality. The room from Sister location, the game Ennard is from, can already be found within the base game. All of the parts were there for you to make this story not need to include the books in any way whatsoever. If you look at the animatronic blueprints from Sister location, Funtime Freddy has a feature Funtime Foxy, has a feature called Parental Voice Sync and Reply. Funtime Freddy has group coordination and voice mimic and luring and tracking abilities. Ballora has Detour and Misdirect. All three of those characters make up Ennard. Ennard also uses disguises, and could easily have been infected by the glitch trap virus you already set up in the previous game, if they wanted to go that route with this. Hell, they could have just had Baby forcibly rejoin the amalgam of personalities and force herself to be dominant, whilst taking over everyone else's abilities, instead of using the glitch trap virus, if they wanted to completely remove Afton from the situation altogether. You could have kept the whole thing exactly the same. The whole storyline wouldn't have needed changes, because we already had a character established to do exactly what the Mimic does within the canon of the games. And you chose not to. You chose to give everyone homework. To make everyone that picked up this game expecting to be able to understand it have no clue what's going on, and no way to find out solely through the games. And to me, that's just wrong. A game series shouldn't be reliant on its books to be understood. But that's where this franchise has chosen to go. As I stated before, I have a lot of feelings about this game, and just in general. Most of them are disappointment, not because the game is bad, but because it has so many things it could have and should have done better. Yet we're still finding game-breaking bugs and glitches that skip whole chunks of game or prevent you from being able to finish the game altogether. And that's not okay. And I only hope Help Wanted 2 does better, because this mess of Freddy Spaghetti seems to not have stuck as well with a lot of us. That's all I have to say about this. I know it's the FNAF anniversary, and I should have probably picked a much brighter and happier topic, but, you know, here we are. Waiting for an incomplete game to be fully fixed and realizing very quickly that it's probably not going to be, because they still haven't put out all of the patches they need to, even for the DLC that they just put out. And as much forgiveness as I give to Steel Wool for being forcibly rushed, there's only so much that I have to give, given that it's been at least a year since base game has come out, and there's still problems with it. So, here we are. I think this is the end for now. Or at least for this video. It wasn't supposed to be a FNAF channel, but this is I'm going to post whatever is on my mind at this moment channel. And this is what's been bothering me recently, as I've been introducing new people to this franchise, and they've picked up this game because it's the newest and has the most content and most DLC, and then have subsequently come to me being incredibly confused by the entire situation, because they are new fans and we're not expecting to have to do research, and they shouldn't have to. But here we are. And here I go. Again, repeating the same thing. So, I'm going to go away for now. I hope you have a good FNAF-versary. A good Fazversary. Do yourself some fan art. That's what I intend to do. And instead of thinking about all of the problems of this game, let's think of the good parts of the things, because that's what this video was supposed to be about, was me removing all of the bad things from my brain, so that hopefully I can convince it to do the good ones now, because I will have gotten all of the bad things off of my chest, and how simple it would have been to fix them. Alright. Goodbye.